Welcome back, everybody. It's Jessica. So glad that you are here and landed on a mini series where I'm reflecting on seasons and how seasons can really be mirrors to how we can approach the seasons within our life. So just like in nature, we also move through winters, spring, summer, and fall. And so I thought it'd be a neat way, as an earthy girl that I am, to share a little bit about what's been going on over the last 7 years through the lens of seasons. So last episode, we talked about winter and the winter that I thought would never end. My goodness. But looking back, I know it served a purpose. And so I think one of the things I'm hoping that you get out of this series is how we can appreciate each season of our life, even if it isn't our favorite season. You know, maybe you're somebody that is a perpetual lover of spring or summer. I just want to live in summer 24/7. That's easy to think when you're in the midst of winter. But don't you have those times when you get into summer and you think, gosh, I really just want to cozy up and put a sweatshirt on, find my favorite hot cup of tea, and just enjoy. So, you know, we oftentimes are looking to the other seasons when we're in the midst of a different one and appreciating it. But maybe there's opportunity to appreciate the seasons that we're in when we're in them. So, little food for thought there. So spring. All right, let's think a little bit about spring. What comes to mind when you think of spring? I think of, fresh starts. I think of new beginnings and renewal. But I want to point something out, a little bit of a reminder here. Just because it's spring doesn't mean everything will be positive, rainbows and butterflies. And also on the flip, just because we're in winter doesn't mean it's going to be all stormy, doomy, and gloomy. So I think one of the things I want to, kind of plant a seed, if you will, for pun intended, is we want to move away from labeling seasons as good or bad. Because life is full of gray areas, isn't it? So we want to try not to label whatever season we're in as good or bad, and just let it be. Let it be. And if we let it be, let's see if that mindset helps us to interact with it in a different way. Maybe a more open-minded way, or, when you're trying to brainstorm or think of something new or problem solve, and you're in kind of a mood where you're either annoyed or just you're not relaxed, maybe you're rushing around. Those types of mindsets are never going to be fertile ground for having that creativity come through. So if we're just to put the good or bad labels up on the shelf and just let it be and allow ourselves to kind of relax into it, I bet we'll be able to see a little bit more of the gifts that the season we're in has for us. In spring, we also have a couple other things happening. We've got temperatures warming up, and I love that. You can literally smell the sun when you're outside. You can see blooming flowers, perhaps trees are getting their green back. We've got longer days, right? Animals are coming out of hibernation. We've got birds, right, coming back and chirping around. So, there's a lot of kind of rebirthing, coming out, fresh starts, think second chances, growth and awakening. And that can be something that we kind of lean on and look forward to after a winter. So that natural opening that's happening in nature is going to be happening within us as well. Something that comes too in spring is the spring equinox, which is a day that symbolizes equal day and night. And I think that can remind us of transitions and the importance for equilibrium as well. So back to kind of my life transitioning out of winter, I left you in the last episode with me living in a 400 square foot apartment in Santa Cruz and the pandemic just happening. And so come May 2020, I had no more patience for living in my tiny box of an apartment. It was beautiful, and I was grateful to have the roof over my head and some space to really be with myself. But after a while, realizing, this town is shut down, I have no friends, I was kind of going off the deep end mentally and getting into a lot of fear, anxiety-based thought processes. And so I decided to move back into my parents' place in Modesto, which is my hometown. And that's a whole other thing, right? Moving back in with your parents after you've lived away for a while. It's humbling, to say the least. But my sister, Kelsey, was actually living with them at the time, so it made it a little bit more bearable. But it did wonders for my mental health and just being around other people and getting out of the doom scrolling and just rabbit hole diving that I was doing on all sorts of things. So it was a good thing in the end. So there was a mini new beginning there in spring, moving back and starting anew and allowing myself to ease in and open up to, okay, here I am. Let's embrace this new place, but yet so familiar place back in Modesto. So I stayed there for a little bit. Come September of 2020, I actually found my own place in Modesto, and it was literally my dream home. Everything that I wanted to cultivate into a home, I found it. So it was wonderful. I was on top of the world, really, being able to purchase a home as a single female and really stepping into my adulthood and my empowerment. And it did wonders for just how I was feeling about myself. And it was a huge, huge accomplishment, one that I had saved my entire working career up until that point to purchase. And so it was a huge milestone, huge goal that I wanted to do. And I always pictured doing that with somebody else. And, with the breakup, with my previous relationship, the blindsided one in 2018, I talked to him right before we broke up about, hey, let's put some numbers down. Let's figure out how we're going to buy a house, and let's start planning for kids or marriage and all of those things. So it had always been on my mind, and I always knew from a very young age that it was important for me to own my own place. So that's that. So this place is where I intended to grow my garden and bloom year after year, my permanent home. 3 months after I found my new spot, another new beginning happened. My father unexpectedly passed away in December. So had a couple stints of newness, moving back in to my parents' house in May and then getting my own place in September. And then here was this brand new, just hurricane storm that took me, just tailspinned me. It was another blindsided change. I did not see it coming. And it really put shockwaves through not only my life, but my family and all of the people that knew him. So miss you, Dad. So there's that. I was in a relationship at the time, and after the passing of my dad, Jeff, it was like the okayness in the relationship that I had with this guy, granted every couple days, we were okay, there was a lot of really bad cycles. But after the passing of my dad, it turned really from kind of okay here and there to bad to ugly, like really pretty quickly. And I was stuck, but I didn't feel stuck at the time. I think I was clinging on to a sense of survival, with my world being blown open and no longer having my dad, I was clinging on to everything and anything around me as a way to try to feel safe. And I think that's what our brain, our body does to manufacture safety when the world is in that kind of state. So it was, unsupported. It was unhealthy. It was toxic. We had roller coaster weeks where we would just fight and mend and then go again. And fast forward a little bit of time, May 2021, on one of our ups, we got engaged. And I thought, I feel I'm a pretty intrinsically positive person. I thought, well, maybe this will solve our downs. So, and it did for a week. But ultimately it didn't. And having this ring on my finger and experiencing these roller coaster weeks with this person, I started to really realize just how permanent forever was. And I'll never forget this moment of clarity I had. One day I was sitting out in my backyard, super stressed out and just kind of numb to everything. And I was just admiring the backyard. I had some rose bushes, and I had 5 rose bushes in all different colors, and just kind of witnessing nature, if you will. And I just had this download, this lightning bolt of wisdom that came in, and I call it, my Jessness. I talk a lot about your Ness in my first book, Your 20s, but that inner voice of wisdom. So my Jessness basically told me, run, leave, get out while you can before you have intermixed every part of your life. And it was so clear and so succinct that I knew it was coming from a place of truth. Because I truly believe anytime that we get a message to do something and it's super convoluted and it's rationalizing and over explaining and trying to make things fit, that I believe is probably maybe our ego or our brain or something man-made, if you will, that is trying to justify a decision that might not be best for you. Truth for me comes through as clear, cut. There are no explanations because it just is what it is. So run, leave, get out while you can came through. And, I ignored it, as you do. I ignored it a little bit for about a couple months, actually, because I thought, well, gosh, this is all I know. This relationship, this up and down, these moments where we fight it out, this is all I know. And the unknown, I was not ready, nor was I resourced to face it. I was also, on some level, it's hard to kind of admit now because it's looking back, it's different. I'm in a completely different place now. But at the time, I was serious about this guy. And at the same time, not thinking straight. And grief will do that to you. If you have ever felt grief, and chances are, well, you have, because you're human. It's a human thing. Grief will do that to you. So you probably know there's been a time in your life that you went through something and you look back and go, why did I do that? Or why did I choose to pick up the phone and call that person? Or why did I say that? And you're not thinking straight. So I was grasping on to any sense of security that I had, even when that security wasn't safe or supportive. But our emotions they're not facts, right? They're not logical. So it makes sense that me not thinking straight, the grief, and wanting to hold on to something, even when it totally is unhealthy, made sense to me at the time. So, that message of leave, run, get out of here kept coming up over and over and over. And that's been true to this day in terms of experiences that I've had. If I have a reoccurring message, a reoccurring thought, and it's truth and I ignore it, it will keep coming back. It's not going to say, okay, good luck, girl. We warned her. That'll keep coming back, keep coming up in different ways to try and get your attention. Because us as people, we have free will, right? So we could hear something that's the the best advice. We could have the clearest download. We could write something in our journal and it's just right there, clear as day on what to do next. And our free will, we can ignore it. So that's part of, the human experience as well. So anyway, fast forward, the message isn't going away, and I eventually detached and was able to get away from him. And it was not easy. It was messy and hard, and there were struggles. It took a few months even, because he was living with me at the time. And I look back on that girl, right? Me 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I just admire the intense strength that took, given where I was at mentally and emotionally and physically, really, because we weren't healthy physically, I'll tell you that. So it was just kind of, on all counts, just not at my best, not feeling my best, not supported to be at my best either. So I'm not sure where that strength came from, but it reminds me to this day that I have done hard things and I can do them again. Even when I don't know if I can, or I don't know where I'll find the courage, I know for a fact it's deep in there. It's built in and something that I can rely on and trust. It was like the floodgates of sorrow and grief just came spewing out, feelings from when I lost my dad, and feelings of just reflecting over the last, close to, 6, 7, however many months of being with this person, but especially the suppressed feelings from losing my dad. I don't think I had let myself feel them, or even because of the dynamics in the relationship I was in, there wasn't any room for my grief. There just wasn't. So, I kind of closed the lid on that toxic relationship. And in the fall of that year, I got back into a horrible toxic relationship. And the person that I am today honestly looks at that woman making the decisions and just wants to hug her and just wants to hold her and tell her how much she's cared for, because she didn't have a resource like me at the time. She was confused. She was trying her best. And I think she did what she could with where her mindset was, how scared she felt, how unsupported she felt. And she was doing the absolute best with the tools in her toolbox. And a lot of the tools that I developed and just have grown into and experienced since then weren't there. So me now can look back and still give myself compassion to that younger self, and versus, I guess, picking her apart. God, she was so stupid. How could she have done that? Why was she with that guy? What took her so long? Look at her. She's in another toxic relationship. Get it together, right? We all have that little mean voice. And in my book, Thank You for Dumping Me, I call it the team of judges, because I don't have just one people. I have a team. It's a boardroom of really mean ladies up there, but we can learn to quiet them by showing up with the person we are in today and say, listen, ladies, like, back off. She was doing the best she could. And I can call in that version of myself and just give her the love she didn't get then, now, right? And that still feels really nurturing and supportive for our nervous systems. Our nervous systems don't know when something happened. They're not like, nope, it's been 2 months, you can't really touch on that. No, our nervous system, if it needs regulating in any certain way around any certain situation, we can do that in real time. It's never too late to give yourself the nurturing and care that you didn't get or give yourself prior. So I'll just leave that there. And I think, looking back on especially these two decisions in terms of getting in relationships with that are very toxic and unsupportive, is I think I was clinging to romantic relationships as a way of distraction. The toxic relationships, they had the most drama. It had a lot of opportunities to disassociate from what I was going through with the grief of losing my dad. And so, I do think it was a coping mechanism. because our body will always do anything it can to survive. And in my case, I guess I couldn't come to terms with the fact my dad had left and passed away. And, yeah, like even to this day, it's hard to even say that and like admit that. But at the time, I couldn't come to terms with the truth of it. So stepping out of it and being disassociated and distracting myself in some other alternate universe, aka these relationships, somewhat helped me cope. Because it's not like I could have I was just tapped out of life. I had responsibilities. I had a new mortgage to support on my own. I had lots of family responsibilities that needed my attention. And I only had so much attention. So I didn't have enough attention for the care and grieving that I needed to do. So anyway, this second toxic relationship lasted about 5 months. I was in turmoil most of the time. I have the journal entries and the voice notes I recorded to myself to prove it. Trust me, they're not pretty. And eventually it ended with him by he just ghosted me. Literally ghosted me and ignored me. It was another stab to the heart because I felt abandoned again without any explanation. So first having it be my dad's passing, and now this feeling of being abandoned, just manufactured in a different way, a different scenario with this guy. And I will say, the way that I'm speaking about my dad's passing and it being so unexpected, I think you can probably infer what happened. But just in case you are unsure, or it's the way that I'm talking about it's confusing, is that he took his own life. So it's a little different way of someone passing away, and there were a lot of answers that I did not have, and so that feeling of being abandoned was nice and fresh, really. He ghosted me, and then another floodgate of grief came over me. And this time it was a culmination of everything, and it was almost too much to handle, really. I couldn't eat. I wasn't sleeping. There are many nights I remember just spinning out entirely, and I'll just leave it at that I am so glad that I'm here today and able to reflect on it. I took a long break after that, after dating. Do you blame me? Do you blame me? Yeah, needed a little bit of time to decompress. One of the areas I think in my life where I learn the most and are given the most opportunities for growth is in these long-term committed relationships, and romantic relationships being at the top of that list. Second for me would probably be family, and third would probably be myself, I guess. So eventually come spring 2022, I started dating again. Here we go. Round, who's counting, right? Started dating again. So it was, a rocky road, sometimes fun, sometimes not. I was on a bunch of different dating apps, and my goodness, it's like a full-time job having to text and comment and all sorts of stuff. Gosh, there's a lot of energy that goes into that. But, had a couple situationships, had a guy that I liked a lot, but just didn't work out. And he actually ended up getting married right after he dated me. And which, by the way, side note, that has actually been something that has happened to me 6 or 7 times, where I was the last person that someone dated before they got married. What's that say about me? I don't know, but I always think it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, I tired him out so much. He's just like, I got to settle down. I don't know. It's just funny. I think people are just, they're all different situations, but it's happened like since some of the guys I dated in high school and then college and then through after college. So I just think it's a funny little fun fact, ? But anyway, did that come July of 2022. the biggest plot twist of my life happened. A new boy, a bombshell, entered my villa, if you will. Little Love Island reference for you. I'm watching the latest episodes right now, the All Stars. But anyway, who is this bombshell? It's none other than my ex from 2018. Yeah, that's right. My 2018 ex is now back. The blindsided breakup boy is now back in my life. It had been 4 years at this point since the blindsided breakup. 4 years of not talking, no snooping, not even to see what he's up to on social, not even LinkedIn. Okay, I really cut it off. I even deleted like every photo we took together, which I totally regret to this day. But that just kind of shows how much I just had to cut it off because of how hurt I was. So here I am, July 2022, and I look down at my phone and I see his name come through on a text message. What? Never in a million years did I think this was going to happen. He was in town in Modesto for a vintage baseball game. Yes, you heard it right. He plays vintage baseball. And this was the 4th of July. And so he reached out. He was in town. He threw out, hey, would love to see what you've, what you're up to, what you've done with the place. He had known that I moved because after my dad passed, he sent me a nice text and was like, hey, I know that you and your dad, were like best friends. He was your guy. And at that point I said, oh, it was just like small talk. Like, where are you living these days? I'm like, I bought a house in Modesto, which actually felt very good to tell him because it was like, yes, like I didn't need you. I did it by myself. So kind of funny that the house is now acting as, he's using it as an opportunity like, hey, would love to see what you've done with the place. So he stopped by that day. And I'll save you all the details, but stopped by that day, we reconnected, talking, catching up. We ended up going on a few dates. And after a couple weeks, he asked me if I wanted to give us another go. And I said yes. And so we started dating again 4 years later. And meanwhile, that little book that I, mentioned, Thank You for Dumping Me, that's about him. And well, it's mainly about me, but he's in the book. It talks about the days leading up to the breakup, the days after, and then the healing journey, messy middle, journey that I went on after that. And so I told him at the time when we reconnected, saying, hey, I got to tell you, I'm writing this book about the breakup. And he's like, oh, no kidding. And he's always been super supportive. Like, hey, whatever you want to write in that book, write it. Like, I fully support that. And I don't know if I could say the same about myself. Like, what? You're writing a book? Let me read. Can I proofread it for you? Can I get an early copy? But anyway, so at this point, the book was about 30% done. I had written on and off throughout kind of 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 was just a shit show. So I really didn't write much at all, but it was still in the works. I was still collaborating with its essence, if you will. So we decided to give it another go. And something about those 4 years, I think, in between for both of us allowed us to grow and live separately and blossom into new versions of ourselves. And those new versions of ourselves allowed us to connect in a totally different way. He felt like a different person, but all of the parts of him that I fell in love with were still there. And so we begin again in that July 2022 time. So now I want to read you a activity from the Thank You for Dumping Me book. And this is on page 118 if you have it. Go ahead and screenshot the time on the podcast so you can come back to this later. Otherwise, you can always purchase a copy of the book, and it's on Audible as well. Okay, so I'm going to read this. I've got a closing quote, and that's that. Okay, so this is called The Unknown, the Known, and the unknowable, aka what to do when you're totally fixated on unraveling life's mysteries. Obsessing over knowing doesn't get us closer to feelings of security. And most times, just because we know something doesn't make the hurt feel any better. Let's play a game where we explore these three realms of known, unknown, and unknowable. The realm of the known. List out the things you know for absolute sure, things that you are certain about in your life. Write down at least 5 things you know to be true or certain. These can be facts, beliefs, or experiences you are confident in. I'll go first to help you get started. After a breakup, everyone likes to think they know what's best for you. Fact. Isn't that true? Okay, realm of the unknown. Here's where you contemplate uncertainties or unanswered questions in your life. Write down at least 5 things you are unsure about or curious to explore further. These could be relationship mysteries, like the ones I've been tearing through my new apartment in search of answers to. That relates to the chapter that I'm referring to. So just side note, these self-discovery prompts relate to the theme of what I'm going through in the book. So then you get to try it on for your own experience. These could also relate to personal inquiries or philosophical ponderings. Then we go into the realm of the unknowable. Here we're talking about things beyond human understanding. However many people on YouTube love to know everything, the truth is we don't, and we can't. Write down at least 3 things that fall into this category. These can be anything we won't ever have a definite answer for, like the vastness of the universe or how you might never know something about someone who's now dead. Each of us is going to have a different energetic DNA around these 3 realms, which brings different levels of comfort. Some of us are happiest in the known, like him, referring to my ex, super comfy in the realm where facts are king and science rules the world, while others surrender more easily to the mystery of the unknown, the realm I'm desperately trying to get the hell out of right now. Take a moment to consider how these realms of knowing relate to your understanding of the world, your relationships, and your relationship with self. So that is on page 118, and thank you for dumping me. And I will leave you with this closing thought in relation to spring. Spring is an awakening, a messy, beautiful return to the world. It's tender and raw, with growth that demands vulnerability and a willingness to begin again. So while my spring, boy, wasn't perfect, I began again at each turning point and allowed myself to be vulnerable, raw, and in that growth and this return to the world in a new way allowed me to keep going. All right, take care, and I'll see you back for summer.